Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Rossini. Chris, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you.
Very good. Today I'd like to visit with you about who's telling the truth and who's telling lies. We hear about this all the time. Who is telling the truth? You have all kind of accusations, especially over this Russiagate thing. And we want to deal with the whole issue of telling the truth. Which is obviously the opposite of the people who lie. But the things that I've been thinking about has been that how many people have gotten into trouble because they tell the truth. That's one thing governments can't stand. And the one slogan that I've used is truth is treason in an empire of lies. And the worse things get, the more they lie. I have an interesting quote here from George Orwell. He said, "The further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it." And you know, what comes to my mind immediately is, boy, they really love Assange, don't they? You know, boy, how could they hate anybody even more, you know, than what the world, everybody hates Assange, not just Democrats or just Republicans. Everybody hates Assange. And here, you know, he has suffered tremendously for speaking the truth, releasing the truth. He just gave us information. I believe he was a true journalist, and yet everybody's on his case. And as we speak, there's talk that something, you know, he may be kicked out of the Bolivian embassy, you know, in London. And who's going to be there to stop him? Will the London police, the British government capture him and turn him over to the American government? Because there's a lot of people in this government say, we can't stand this guy, but they never say why. And the whole thing is, he was exposing the truth and allowing the information that others gave him, like Manning and others, to put this information out. But truth is something that doesn't sit well for the authoritarians. Truth is something that you know, true libertarians should cherish, because you know, if you're going to have a free society, truth and trust is pretty darn important. And right now, I would say we're pretty weak on those issues. And I want to just visit with you, Chris, a little bit about why this is so important that we try to unravel the whole situation on why there are so many lies, and how are we going to sort this out, because it's a real mess as far as I'm concerned.
It is a mess, and it's a whole system that's in place. There are some truths that are allowed to be spoken of. Politicians can talk about anything they want domestically, presidents too, any domestic issues. You could laugh at politicians and call them names. So we could thank our founding fathers for the First Amendment. But a line has been drawn that no one is allowed to tell the truth about the military empire and foreign policy. Once that is broached, there's big problems. And we all know when Dr. Paul was on a major stage, and today we see with Tulsi Gabbard, and even when Donald Trump was campaigning, you know, anybody that has a major microphone, they want to shut down right away. Even when Trump was saying get along with Russia and NATO's obsolete, now they took care of all that. Trump is not touching anything with the empire, but that's how it works. In America, it's empire first.
Right, and you know, I think that you're absolutely right. The foreign policy is a big issue because that really builds the emotions of patriotism and national defense and the Constitution and protecting liberties. So that is a big deal. So they want to make sure they hide the truth about why they go to war and what they're doing, and then they have investigations, and investigations are always there to cover up, you know, whether it's a Kennedy investigation or 9/11 investigation. We can't even depend on the investigation. And how many people are happy with the investigations dealing with Russiagate? There's some truth out there, but there's a lot of lying going on there, and people are trying to attempt to sort all this out. But there's another issue. It doesn't quite qualify with foreign policy, but it enters all fabrics of our society, and that is the environmentalists. You know, if you don't go along with environmentalism, they might not rush you off to jail immediately, but boy, there is tremendous social penalties for that. That they would say you're a denial. You know they put global warming denier, which they want to associate you with a Nazi. You're denying the truth. You're denying the truth, and one phrase that bothers me when they talk about the people who fib a lot about the environment is science has settled it. And you're not supposed to do it. Before, patriotism has settled it. National defense has settled it. But in environmentalism, science has settled it, which is a bunch of baloney. Right now, fake science is distorting the whole thing. And I got to thinking, how long has this problem been around? And you know, it's been around for a long time. And I think back about Copernicus, you know, in the 1500s. He comes up with a theory, you know, that the Earth rotates around the sun. And shortly after he released that, he died, but he had a student, I think his name was Bruni, an Italian student, and he started lecturing on this, and he was burnt at the stake. You know, because of this blasphemy, because it was related to law and church and all this. But the science had settled it for how many years? Not 1,000, probably many thousand. The history of all mankind up until these discoveries that they weren't true. But they kept saying, science have settled it, science have settled it. And then Galileo comes along and, you know, almost 100 years after that, and he proves it. He proves Copernicus' theory was true. So he goes out and, of course, gets arrested. And they try him, and he was put in prison. And when he finally released his information, he was, you know, in his 60s. But the last 9 years of his life, guess where he was? In prison. He was in prison all that time. So he became an unfree person because he demonstrated what Copernicus said, and that's how long it takes. Matter of fact, it even took about 300 years after Galileo for it to be accepted that the science now absolutely proved that Copernicus and Galileo were correct. So, and I think that's what's going on today. It really is an annoyance when people write people off who want to just ask questions about these weather changes and global warming and all the fiction that goes on, all used just to promote their type of authoritarianism and to punish you. Can you imagine, you know, if you were a skeptic on that and you were teaching something else, if you get a job, you're lucky. But if you have a job, you'll probably get fired. And you say, oh, well, that's university and that's all private. Well, there is no such thing as a private university anymore because it's all government money. So this is the whole thing. But right now, I think that is one place where the myths are out there and people are growing you know, concerned about it. There's a lot of people on our side of this now because it's getting to be a farce. But if it takes as long as it took to know the truth about Copernicus and Galileo, we have a long way, but maybe things will move along a little more quickly. But science certainly hasn't solved, it hasn't settled all the questions about global warming, and we need a little more truth telling there instead of this political demagoguing.
Right, Dr. Paul. And what we're describing here, whether it be the militarism or climate change, is how power works and how it has to work. Because the truth is, we're all born free and independent people. But that poses a big problem to people who want to rule. How do you rule a group of individuals who believe that they're free and they're independent? You can't. So you have to lasso them in. And the way that power lassos people in is through fear. Fear of the foreign boogeyman, fear that the world is going to end in 12 years unless you give up all of your liberty to the politicians. And whenever anybody comes along and slips through the cracks and points out that these are all lies, they have to be silenced immediately because it messes up the whole fear system that they've built up. So that's what we're dealing with here, is people understanding that they're truly free and independent versus people that want to rule them.
And we talked a lot about that principle, dealing with the money issue, because that's based on a lie. It's based on a fiction. It's based on counterfeiting. And the bumper sticker that I referred to that was in my office while I was in Congress, "Don't steal. The government hates competition." In a way, this is true about lying. Don't lie. Governments don't want the competition, because governments are allowed to lie. I always wondered why court proceedings, the prosecutors and all the government officials can lie. They're not under oath. But boy, I'll tell you what, if the FBI can trick you into perjuring yourself, boy, that is big time. So many, that is the ultimate crime, is to lie to the government. This doesn't mean that we should lie to our government, but it also means that the government shouldn't lie to us. We should. The government lies to us all the time, but they want a monopoly over lying. They don't want anybody to lie to them. But in many ways, the lies that are told by government are vicious. In law enforcement, one of the procedures that I don't like is this entrapment. Go and lie to people and get them to do something that they were maybe thinking about or on the verge of it, or maybe weak, and they go, "Oh, okay, I'll go along with it," and they entrap them and use this as a big deal. I just captured so-and-so. I think entrapment is based on a lie, and government shouldn't be allowed to do that. If they lie to try to get somebody to do something, I think the government's every bit, if not more, guilty than the person who was too weak and capitulated and went along with it. So that is one thing that I hope people realize, that government should not be able to get away with the lying that they do, and that is what happens. Just think, you mentioned in your opening statement, Chris, just think how many lies have been told to get us to go to war. I mean, that is just criminal, and that's been going on probably for a very, very long time. But in our recent history, it happens all the time, because people don't really like war, and unfortunately, they don't wake up until a lot of people have died. And but it's a real tragedy that so many people have died because of government lies, but they never get punished. They never get punished. So often, the authorities, whether it's the FBI and the CIA and other police authorities, when they really, really do some bad things and lie their way out of it, they don't get punished very often. But just try lying about your income tax or something like that. You'll go to prison for life. And literally, I think that has happened. I think of the case with Irwin Schiff, Peter Schiff's dad. Boy, that is a tragic story. The way I see him, he broke the law, but he was obeying the Constitution, and he was practicing civil disobedience, and they literally put him away for life. He died in prison. He was in isolation and had been chained to a bed. And what he believed in was the fact that the Constitution, strictly interpreted, does not endorse the personal income tax. And that's what he was arguing. So this was the case. So he was practicing civil disobedience by saying, this is the case. And they say, well, we're going to challenge it. The law says this, and the Constitution says this. I can understand how they could have a legal argument and even arresting a person like that. But to put him away as one of the most vicious criminals ever and let him die in prison, that is when governments really feel challenged. So when they get challenged on social policies, or get challenged on foreign policy or on tax policy, don't say that the income tax is unconstitutional. You could get into trouble by doing this. And this is something that has been around and certainly is a threat to us having a decent conversation about the pros and cons of how we solve these problems and how we do get to the truth.
Yes, and I do advise our viewers, we did years ago, if you search our archives, we did a show on Irwin Schiff, Peter Schiff's dad. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are fans of Peter Schiff that also watch our show. But I'll finish, Dr. Paul. Since government has to lie in order to maintain their power, what's an individual to do? And it seems obvious to me that you have to discover the truth on your own, not only about your innate freedom, but the truth about everything else that you can find as well. And it's hard to do because you may come across that you've been wrong your whole life about something, and you have to admit that you're wrong. And you're also faced with an environment that is constantly bombarding you, whether it be in schools, the media, Hollywood, major sports. It's everywhere because government has to keep the propaganda going 24/7, whether it's for climate change, empire. It has to be constant because if they stop even for a moment, you may slip back into reality, and they don't want that. So it's a worthy goal to just commit yourself to learning the truth, even if it's painful truth. And, the freer you become, the more truth you understand.
Yes, and I already mentioned Assange. He's in the news as we speak on whether or not he will be released and who will capture him again and put him in another prison. But Chelsea Manning is in the news again because when she was in the military, she got information to reveal the truth about what we were actually doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it was ruthless, needless, vicious killing and torture. And she revealed this information. That is not permitted. No, that is not permitted. You have to hate America by telling the truth about the atrocities that we might be involved in. But, she was sent to prison for 35 years, but she got out after 7 years because Obama gave her a pardon. And this I thought was perfectly fine. And I'm sure she knew that she was breaking the rules, but she did it very precise purpose. But right now, they want her to testify against WikiLeaks in order to punish more people. And the understanding is that she would vary this a little bit and they might leave her alone. But she just refused to testify, which will be civil disobedience and will be trouble. So she's back in prison. Matter of fact, she was in confinement, solitary confinement. I understand that she's probably out of there right now, but she is a true believer and she's practicing it. And there's a lot of people in this country who still believe, oh, that was horrible what Obama did. Release somebody like this, and she's committed treason, this sort of thing. Well, I'll tell you what, she's on the right side of this issue as far as telling the truth about what we've done in the military. And we won't go into it today, but we've talked a lot about the misinformation we get on economic statistics and through our Federal Reserve, because it is those lies that perpetuate so much problem that they bail out the rich at the expense of the poor. I mean, that whole system of money is a big lie, and those are the kind of lies that need to be exposed. So there are a lot of work out there, and there's a real challenge because it's a challenge between pursuing the truth and speaking it out and not crossing the line and be willing to practice civil disobedience. Martin Luther King did. He was nonviolent. I think somebody nonviolent practices civil disobedience and knows what he's talking about. I think that's very, very good. But there is a line that one has to realize. If you cross the line, they'll say, you're breaking the law, you're breaking the law. What does the law say? And we have to force the law. And they're not saying, is it moral, is it constitutional? They don't want to hear the constitutional argument, and they don't want to hear about morality. They want to, what does the law say? The law says you pay your income tax because that's the way the law is written, and you can't even talk about it. Actually, Irwin Schiff was finally put in prison at the end for just talking about it. He was answering some questions. We told you were never allowed to talk about this again, and you're talking about this again because he was answering a question. So to me, his ultimate arrest occurred, with his taking away of his First Amendment rights. So yes, governments should be, we should look at government very cautiously. It's the governments that lie us into war. It's the governments that lie us into the inflationary financial bubbles. It's the government that lies us into an educational system that teaches radical environmentalism and sets the stage for the answer to all our problems of all this lying has to be total totalitarianism of a socialist brand. So yes, we have our hands full, but we also have an opportunity because the system we have now is falling apart, and our message is out there. More people know about it than a lot of us realize. And there is some competition there. It's just that you can't depend on what you learn at your college courses. You can't depend on what you hear on the evening news. And now we have to be very, very careful on what you even get on the internet. So it is a challenge, but I think there's a lot of people who are still very interested in hearing the truth. I think we have seen, a little more excitement about finding the truth after Russiagate broke through. So we should keep plugging along, and people shouldn't be discouraged because that is all that we have. We don't have guns to go out. We don't have control of the university. We don't have Facebook to monitor everybody else except ourselves. So we have to do what we can with the tools that we have, and they're still available, and people will still listen. So that's what we'll continue to do here at the Liberty Report, is promote the cause of liberty by doing our very best in presenting the truth to you. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.